Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video day, and today we're going to be recapping Houston Texans day one of free agency. It was a busy day for the Houston Texans to open up free agency, as the Houston Texans made 7 free agency signings of day one of free agency. Before we get to the free agency signings, we're going to start off with the biggest move the Texans made today. It was not a free agency signing. It was trading Laremy Tunsil and a 4th-round pick for a 2nd-round pick, 3rd-round pick, which is pick number 75 in this year's draft. Also, with that, a 4th and a 7th round pick. I'm a fan of the trade. I mean, Laremy Tunsil is really good without, not giving up sacks, and, protecting the quarterback. But it didn't seem like he was willing to, do a restructured contract. Not only that, but he had a huge penalty problem, getting called for penalties with his Texans team. And it didn't seem like he was really great with potentially helping these younger offensive linemen the Houston Texans have with getting better, and helping develop these guys. And, was making a lot of money, and the Texans got a lot of draft capital for him, and some great draft capital. I mean, got a 2nd and a 3rd and a 4th and a 7th, and all they had to give up was Tunsil and a 4th. So, look, I don't mind the trade at all. I just hope the Texans can, replace him nicely. That's the only thing I hope for. All right, let's get into the free agency signings. The Houston Texans today made 7 signings. Most of these signings were to improve the defensive line, as a total of 3 of these signings were defensive line additions. 2 wide receivers brought in, a linebacker, and a defensive back. And also, not to mention, 2 former Houston Texans re-signed today. Not guys that were part of 2024's team, but guys that were part of teams before that. And that's what we're going to start off with. And the reason why we're going to start off with this guy is because he was the first signing of the day. 7 a.m., the Houston Texans strike a deal with Sheldon Rankins. If you're wondering, well, how did the Texans strike a deal with Sheldon Rankins? Free agency didn't start until like 11, 12 o'clock, something like that. Sheldon Rankins was released by the Bengals, and he was able to sign with a team right away. And so the Texans signed him. Last year was Cincinnati, 7 games, 7 starts. He only had 1 sack, 18 tackles. But when he was with the Houston Texans in 2023, he had one of the best seasons of his career and was so huge for this Houston Texans defense. 15 games, 15 starts. He had 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, which he returned for 13 yards and a touchdown, 6 sacks, 37 tackles, and 9 tackles for loss. For only $7 million and 1 year, a 1-year deal, I'm happy Sheldon Rankins is back. All right, then the Houston Texans brought back another familiar face, Tremont Smith. The Houston Texans signed Smith to a 2-year, $7.5 million deal. Smith was with the Texans in 2021 and 2022, has been in Denver the last 2 seasons, playing 34 games with them. He has not played very well. He has 1 fumble recovery and only 9 tackles. But he had a really good season with the Texans in 2022, helping out with special teams. That's one thing that he's done really goodly. It's one of the only great things he's done in Denver the last 2 years is being a huge help on special teams for this Broncos team. If you look at kick returns this year, had 6 kick returns this season for 170 kick return yards. But I don't feel like that's what the Texans. I don't feel like that's what they're bringing him in for. And especially when you have Dameon Pierce and you have another guy that was signed today that is known for his punt and kick returning that I'm going to go over very shortly. I don't think that's what Smith's being brought in for. I feel like it's what he does on the defensive side of the football with playing 17 games, 2 starts last year, his last year with the Texans in 2022, 17 games, two interceptions, 33 yards return on those 2 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, with 22 tackles in his last year with the Texans. So good to have him back as well. Then one of my favorite signings of the day for the Houston Texans was adding in another defensive end, Darrell Taylor, 16 games last season. In his 16 games, 2 forced fumbles, 2 passes defense, 3 sacks, 32 tackles, and 3 tackles for loss. With Seattle in 2023, 17 games, 5 starts, 1 pass defense, 6 sacks. He had 10 sacks with the Seahawks in 2022 in his 16 games. He had 10 sacks in 2022 with 13 QB hits. And now with bringing him in, I'm going to, there's a 1 year, $5 million deal. When I'm going to go over this next signing for the Texans, and I'm going to go over what this defensive end room looks like, because the Texans re-signed Derek Barnett earlier in the day as well. They re-signed Derek Barnett and brought him back on a 1 year, $5 million deal. He played 16 games and 1 start for the Texans last season, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, returning them for 64 yards and 2 fumble recovery touchdowns, 5 sacks, 26 tackles, and 4 tackles for loss. So going back to what I was going to say with the Taylor edition, now you have a defensive end room that looks like this: Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, Derek Barnett, Darrell Taylor, and also Danico Autry. What a defensive end room for this Houston Texans team. So we got a couple more signings left to go over. The last couple, the Texans also identified some issues at the wide receiver position today. They signed Braxton Berrios to a 1 year, $2 million deal. He's very popular on social media with his girlfriend, Alex Earl, who, here's funny enough, I did not know this before this signing of Braxton Berrios, and this can be interesting. This is interesting to talk about. Alex Earl, who's a very famous TikToker and is in a relationship with Braxton Berrios, was the one who presented the award for C.J. Stroud when he won Offensive Rookie of the Year for the 2023 season, but it happened in 2024, beginning of 2024, about a year ago when Stroud won the Offensive Rookie of the Year. The presenter was Alex Earl. I wonder if Braxton Berrios and C.J. Stroud, when they meet up together, if that's something that's brought up. But yeah, I'm excited to bring in Berrios. He's a one-time Pro Bowler, and it should be interesting to bring him in. And he was one of the reasons why I said it doesn't make sense why Smith would be playing. Why Smith would be playing double, why he'd be playing special teams when you got a guy like Braxton Berrios and Dameon Pierce, because Braxton Berrios is very, very familiar with playing special teams and doing kick return and punt returns. That's something he's been very, successful with in his career. Now, kick and punt returns this year had 7 punt returns for 103 yards returned, 3 kick returns for 76 yards returned. 2023 with Miami returned 18 kicks, 450 yards returned. With the Jets in 2021, he was an all-pro. 28 returns kicked, 852 rushing yards. 852 kick return yards with 1 touchdown, which his 1 touchdown was a 102-yard kick return touchdown. That year, he also had 201 punt return yards. So he's been a monster when it comes to kick and punt return yards, and that's why he was an all-pro. I got it wrong. He wasn't a Pro Bowler. He's not a one-time Pro Bowler. He's a one-time All-Pro, and that's what he got in 2021. He's a solid wide receiver. I mean, he didn't have any receptions this year at all, but had in 2023 238 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. In 2021 with the Jets, that same year, he was crazy on special teams, had 431 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, had 2 rushing touchdowns as well that season. So, he can make an impact on the receiving and rushing end, but he's going to help you on special teams. The key thing to note with Braxton Berrios is how the Texans get him for $2 million. He is coming off a torn ACL. That is something to keep an eye out for this Texans team. We'll see how that goes for them. But the Texans, sure, one of their additions was adding in Braxton Berrios as more of a special teams guy than a wide receiver, but can help at wide receiver. Well, they brought in a guy that's going to help in at wide receiver. They brought in Justin Watson, 3-time Super Bowl champion, winning Super Bowl. He's won Super Bowls with 2 of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. Won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. Didn't have a huge role in that Bucs team, but then went to Kansas City and played with Patrick Mahomes. And he had a lesser role this season with Kansas City. 17 games, 7 starts, 32 targets, 22 receptions, and 300 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, but he had a really nice role for the Chiefs in 2023, 16 games, 8 game starts, 53 targets, 27 receptions, 500 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. The thing I like about him, CJ Stroud needs more wide receivers where he can, connect to on deep routes, and that's something Justin Watson can do. He's a guy that has, some real nice skills when it comes to, running deep routes and, how to catch this season. If you look at his longest catches, had a catch this season where, had a 41-yard catch was his longest catch, and then the year before that, had a 49-yard catch and has made some big plays in his career. So I'm excited to see what he can do for this Texans offense. And then the final addition for the Texans in day one of free agency was re-signing Jake Hansen, linebacker. He's been with this Texans team for the last 3 seasons, and this past season was his biggest season of all, 16 games, 2 starts. And in those 2 starts, he had 1 sack, 28 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. Each season with the Houston Texans, Jake Hansen has had more of an expanded role. I'm excited to see if that happens next season. I really like this Houston Texans day one of free agency. I like the Justin Watson addition. I really like the Darrell Taylor addition and the Houston Texans bringing back Derek Barnett and bringing back a familiar face like Sheldon Rankins. I like what Braxton Berrios can do for special teams with the Houston Texans team. I give it and with the Laremy Tunsil trade and the draft capital the Texans got today, I don't think it was an A day for the Texans, but I'll give it a B-, B+ day one of free agency for this Houston Texans team. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and peace out. Go Texans.